everybody. Welcome to Rachel's Reviews. I'm really excited today. We have another female film critics panel today where we are gathering together with some of my friends that are film critics in this world that's mostly male dominated, that cover films, and we're here their perspective of what they think we add to the film critic community. And I'm really excited to have a great panel today. We have I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and joined with me we have Kristen Lopez is here.
Hi everybody.
Yes. Danielle Solzman is here.
Happy to be here.
Yes. And Alyssa from Mainly Movies is here.
Hi.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I want to give each of you an opportunity to introduce yourself. And so let's start with Alyssa. Why don't you introduce yourself and how you got into reviewing movies on YouTube?
So my name's Alyssa, and I have always been, I'm sure, like everybody else, I've always been interested in movies. I liked them quite a bit when I was a kid, and as I got older in high school and college, I got more and more interested in the filmmaking side of things, not just enjoying movies for, just entertainment, but I also liked kind of seeing that side and the critical side and analysis side. And I started off with written reviews, actually, for 5 or 6 years before starting up the YouTube channel. And so that kind of progression, I think, kind of was a logical shift for me, but I enjoyed it. I love talking about movies with people. I love interacting with people, and certainly the YouTube channel allows for that a little bit more than my written reviews ever did. And so I really enjoy that interaction aspect.
That's great. Kristen, what about you? How did you get into film, into world of film criticism?
Yeah, I'd always been around movies as a kid, and then in high school I took a lot of film classes back when American high school electives actually were fun and not cut for the bare minimum. So I did a lot of film work in that regard and love classic movies. And as I started to leave high school, I answered a YouTube or a Craigslist ad looking for a movie reviewer. It made a whopping $10 an hour, or at least $10 a review, and I took it, and I did that for several years, and never really figured it was anything I'd ever make money on, because why would I? But as I slowly needed to continue writing to be able to work, it slowly became something that I could actually make money on and talk about movies. So it was a career I really just fell into, and now that I've been doing it for so long, I don't know anything else I could have done per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's great. Hey, $10, nothing to sneeze at. Hey,
I know. I got. I think in the entire time I was there for I think almost a decade, and I think I got a raise of $1. So made $11 a review when I finished.
Well, we all like to, those big time raises really make a difference. That's funny. That's great. Well, Danielle, what about you? I know you've been on my show before, and so it's fun to have you back. And you got into it a little bit different through writing about sports, right? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I was writing for fan-sided St. Louis Cardinals website and their Kentucky Wildcats website. I was on vacation in Tampa when they had posted in the Google group that they're restarting their film site. I volunteered, and the rest is history. I ended up moving on to pretty much write for my own starting in 2016. With launching Solzman at the Movies in 2017.
That's great. Well, luckily there's a crossover between sports and movies quite a bit with so many great movies about sports. I say I don't really like sports, but I like watching movies about sports. So that works out great. So what I first wanted to talk about is, why do you think it's important to have female and non-binary voices in the film critic community? Because it is so predominantly male voices. Kristen, let's start with you. What do you think that that perspective adds to our analysis of film as a culture?
I mean, I come at it from a perspective that's kind of a minority and a minority and a minority, being a woman, being a Latina, being in a wheelchair. So for me, I think that the more experience you have colors how you view films. I think anybody that says that personal experience should not affect how you watch movies, that's a lie. Personal experience always affects how you watch movies. That's why we have memory tied so closely into movie. And for me, you need those different perspectives to see how we've changed as a film growing body. I mean, I study a lot about, and I write about classic film a lot, and you don't know how we've changed in terms of race, in terms of disability portrayal, in terms of any of those things if you don't know where we started. And oftentimes, white male criticism tends to gloss over that or not make it known. And if you're a minority already, you're used to compartmentalizing in order to enjoy a movie. If I didn't like every movie that I saw because it didn't have a perfect depiction of somebody, we wouldn't like any movies. It's impossible to find something that's perfect. And so in terms of having those different perspectives, you can see whether a movie is positive in a specific portrayal or not. I remember all of the comments from people that saw Sicario when it came out, especially men, who thought that it was such a great, brilliant movie. And the Latino community was saying, no, it's actually really not. If you are Latino, because it situates everybody as a drug dealer. For me, every disabled narrative shows us as obscenely wealthy and bitter. So you don't get those perspectives if you don't have people with those experiences writing about it, because that's the easiest way to do it, unless you educate every film critic out there to know about all those different experiences. The only way you're going to get that is by hiring critics that have those differences of perspective.
Yeah. And even then, even if you did instruct and people are trying their hardest to see through that lens, it's still not ever going to be as authentic, of course, as somebody that's actually living, breathing those experiences in their daily lives, of course.
Right. I mean, I know I have a lot of friends that, mean very well in their discussions about disability, but at the end of the day, they're still able-bodied, and we still have our disagreements about how I would go about things versus how they would go about things. And so I think even the best intentioned people, and we're seeing that a lot right now with Black Lives Matter and people trying to finally, get into Black cinema, there's still those discussions that we have to have about how to approach those. And you can't really unteach a lot of, decades of not just experience, but also film perception. Media creates this narrative that causes us to look at the world a certain way. And that's really hard to unteach.
Yeah. Danielle, for you as a trans critic, how has that experience been for you? Both from a, from film perspective, from trans perspective, how has that experience of kind of entering this critic world been for you?
Well, I mean, a lot of it, that's a good question.
That's a loaded question. I'm sorry. But what do you think that your voice adds to this discussion? Because I think it adds a lot. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that years ago I would not have thought about. And then over the last few years, especially since coming out as trans, I'll watch older movies and I'll give it the side eye because something's borderline transphobic.
Yeah. And you can share that in your reviews, in your writing. It must be kind of impacting. Yeah.
I remember watching Little, I believe that was last year. It's hard to remember which film comes out when. I mean, these last few months, it's been Blur's Day after Blur's Day after Blur's Day.
Yeah.
Like the only time I know it's Wednesday is when I get a reminder, oh, hey, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s on tonight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember watching Little and the transphobic line, and I'm like, how did that get approved in the final cut? Like that shouldn't have been there at all. And like whoever was on set should have stopped that from happening when it did.
Right.
And so not only did I call it out in my review, I paid attention to who else called it out in their review.
Right. Yes. So Alyssa, we have the experience of being film critics on YouTube and female film critics on YouTube, and that is a rarity. There's not that many of us. And so how have you felt in that experience? And what do you think that we add to particularly the YouTube bubble of film, of the film critic world?
So for me, in terms of my experience with it, I've had a pretty positive experience, which I know is kind of rare. I think in this situation, I think largely that's because I don't have quite the reach or the audience that other people do yet, because I'm fairly new, only about a year on YouTube. But I have found that at least within our community, most people are fairly welcoming. And so that aspect, having other content creators, other YouTubers really be welcoming has been a huge benefit, I think, of that. From the audience side, it varies. Obviously, we get some not so nice people that show up in the comment sections every now and then. But I gotta say, I truly haven't had too many major problems with that. So I think I've been very lucky in that regard compared to the average female YouTuber.
What do you think that female voice is important on in the YouTube film community?
So I think within YouTube and reviewing on YouTube, we get a different audience, I think, of people who come to watch our reviews compared to people who would read film reviews other places. And not unfortunately, but I think a consequence of that is we get quite a few male viewers. I obviously don't have any statistics on this, but I would probably say we probably get more male viewers in terms of comparing to male readers. The ratio between male and female readers versus viewers I think is different. And so like Kristen was saying, having that perspective, and like Danielle was saying, we all have kind of our own take on movies, and we bring our own perspective. We have our own experiences. Movies are a very personal thing, and I think that kind of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes when it comes to reviewing, or how people view reviews and kind of think it's this very black and white, just a rating sort of thing. But everybody brings something to a movie when you go to watch it. And so I think having as many perspectives, female, trans, anybody, all sorts of different viewpoints and kind of, places where we're coming from has a big impact. And like Kristen was saying, I think that can kind of open people's eyes to seeing more than just their own perspective. Because you might not agree with somebody on a particular viewpoint of a film, but having that other side, at least potentially, allows people reading or watching a review to think about that and have that maybe different perspective, perhaps the next time they go and watch that movie.
Yeah, definitely. Kristen, what would you say? Do you have a process that you do when you go sit down? I'm going to watch this movie, and then I'm going to go and write my review. What's your process for that experience, or does it just depend on the movie?
It's been pretty consistent, thankfully, even with the pandemic being what it is. But for me, I think it's easier for most of us to watch a movie in a theater because you have to force those distractions away from you. You don't have your phone, you don't have your computer, you don't have any of that. So for me, I've been watching a lot more stuff at home, just mostly in my day job where I cover television, but also even with film, I have to have my cell phone in another room, and I have to have my computer put away. I need to be able to fully immerse myself with a movie without those distractions, which is so easy to do when you're at home. And the actual process of writing for me, I used to take notes, and I don't do that anymore because the concept of just looking down and writing is often miss more doing that than you would actually watching the movie. So it benefits me to actually do a review immediately after I watch something, so everything's very fresh. I talk to myself a lot too when I watch movies, so I'm like, oh, I can remember that I shouted that was a really dumb plot point. So that's kind of the thing. I really can write best when it's off the cuff, right after I see something, as opposed to having that delay. What I see is delay time in trying to formulate thoughts. I mean, I usually kick myself for forgetting something that I wanted to include in the review after it's written, but I tend to forget more the longer I'm separated from the media.
Yeah. Danielle, can you relate to what Kristen's saying? What's your process for writing a review? Do you take notes? What do you do?
I could definitely relate to what Kristen is saying because I live in a studio apartment. My phone is usually a foot or two away from me, and watching a movie in my apartment, there was a tweet a few weeks ago that there should be a category on Netflix for things you can watch while scrolling on your phone. And I quote tweeted it. I'm like, you're not wrong.
Yeah, right.
Like, when South by was canceled, I had moved my lodging money to Toronto for an Airbnb. And by the time late April came, I'm like, yeah, this thing's not getting type soon. I may as well refund the Toronto Airbnb. And I used that money to upgrade from a 28-inch dumb TV to a 43-inch smart TV.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then
got to get rid of those dumb TVs.
Yeah,
very good. Yeah.
So I've also been, at least during night, turning off the lights to kind of pretend it's my own private screening room. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
so,
I know it has been challenging here in this pandemic to try to really focus. And the other thing, so I was watching Greyhound the other day, and it just kept buffering and buffering. And I'm like, I'm trying to get in the moment here. So
I ended up rewatching Greyhound this morning. I decided to do the free trial for Apple. I mean, last week I emailed Apple. I'm like, the press screener platform, it's nonstop buffering to the point where I couldn't even finish the morning show because it's like buffering every 5 seconds. That makes it completely unwatchable. Everyone should borrow a note from Netflix.
Yeah.
Because they make it easier with having that preview content right on their app.
Yeah. Yeah. Alyssa, what about you? What do you do as you prepare to film a review? What's your kind of process for putting everything together?
Yeah, so I still do written reviews as well. So I kind of use that as my base. And so I am a note person. I know Kristen and Danielle kind of seem more off the cuff with their reviews, but I'm such a note person. I come from a very kind of academic background, so I take notes, I outline stuff. I'm very precise with how I kind of put together my reviews. So I take notes. It's obviously a little bit easier when you're at home watching a movie because you can kind of look down and actually see what you're writing. And if you need to, you could pause to have time to write something or kind of replay something to get a quote correct. But even in the theater, I always bring a notebook, and I've kind of perfected the art of taking notes in the dark and not even looking down. Like I'm just looking at the screen and just keep my finger on one place as I'm writing, and I have ink all over my thumb from keeping track of where on the paper so I don't double write. But I take notes, and then when I'm preparing to write the review, I kind of organize those notes and start to kind of outline kind of the main points that I want to make in a review. And I kind of go from there. And with my my YouTube reviews, at least, I kind of have different segments. Like I have the review section, but I also do pros and cons. Oops, sorry, I hit the microphone. Do pros and cons, and recommendations, and a few other little segments. So that helps to break it up a bit for me.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, I asked everybody to bring or have in mind a movie that they are, a movie review that they are proud of, and one that was an unpopular opinion. And those can coincide, those could be the same. But I thought that we can talk a lot about sort of the experience of being a critic through our reviews. And the one that I was very proud of, one for me, was my review of Your Name. I got to watch it early. This was in November of 2016. And because of relationships that I had built up with Funimation and with the team and with the publicists that were part of it. So I got to watch it before almost anybody else because of the work I'd been done for Rotoscopers and all the interviews that I'd done. And so it was really fun to be able to say, this is amazing. And it's a movie that I absolutely love. One of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie. And to be able to get on and just to say that this is, I said, it's a real achievement. It's a movie that I loved, and just to be super excited about it. I said, it's one of the best romances I've seen in years. It's a total and complete delight. So I think that's a really fun experience as a critic, when you can kind of really introduce something special to the people that follow you, and really convince other people to give something a shot maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. What about you, Kristen? What did you pick?
In terms of reviews that I'm proud of, I think that there's always kind of a dichotomy between something that I'm proud to champion versus something that I think is just really a well-written piece of work, where I'm just like, even if it's bad, I at least had a lot of fun with it. So, I might be cheating a little bit, but I had two for, one for each of those dichotomies. And, in terms of a review I'm proud that people like, and at least it's become kind of my brand, is when I went on my love fest for Dr. Sleep last year, which pretty much everybody now, I'm synonymous with that film. To the point that when it was on HBO last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, everybody kind of pinged me. They were like, hey, Dr. Sleep is on? I'm like, yes, I've created this hive of people that know that I'm really into that movie. But if we're talking about reviews where I'm just like, God, I'm really happy that I put that discourse out into the world, in terms of just like how well written my vitriol was. It was the remake of Ben-Hur from a couple years ago. It was probably my meanest review that I've ever written, but I sat back after I wrote and I was like, damn, that's really good. Like, I came up with some zingers for how bad this movie is. So yeah, those are the two kind of things for me when I take pride in something that I'm happy to get to champion, versus being like, that just was really good writing. And that doesn't always happen with a review every time.
Yeah, I relate to what you're saying, because with Your Name, people will check in with me. They're like, oh, I finally saw it. It was good. You were right. And it's become kind of this thing that I...
Your brand.
Yeah. The people know, oh, Your Name, Rachel's, that's her favorite movie. They know it. And so it's fun because there's a lot of junk that it's nice when you can be a part of something really positive, of introducing something that you really love to people that are watching / reading what you're saying.
It's actually it's amazing to realize how much your writing takes on an element of you. And and I say brand because I think reviews really do emphasize the brand of Critic nowadays, especially when everything now is a brand. For me, if anybody follows me on Twitter, most people know about my love for Oscar Isaac. And when I write reviews with him in them, most people are very shocked that I actually, I guess, am critical about certain things. So like when Life Itself came out, I wrote pretty much 1,200 words about how horrid it was. And
so
people were really surprised. They were like, but it's thought your future husband. And I'm like, it still sucks. I don't care. Like, it's very funny when people, really do kind of internalize the things that you've talked about on social media and how that criticism plays into that or doesn't.
Yeah, that's very true. Ooh, that movie, I was sick and I went to the screening anyway, and I fell hard asleep. Like I think I was actually snoring. My friend was like,
yeah, that movie should make people sick. So, I don't blame
you. Well, Danielle, what's a review that you were proud of, that you like, that you wrote?
I would go with Disobedience. In fact, I just linked to it the other day in a Facebook group because last I checked, I'm the only Orthodox Jewish transgender film critic that I know of.
Right.
If there's anyone else out there, I haven't heard of them. No one's reached out. Oh, like, you should get to know someone. But yeah, I keep linking to that review. I link to other reviews frequently, every now and then.
Yeah. I think that's fun when you can really sort of speak to your background. I felt like I was actually able to do that with my review of The Greatest Showman, because as soon as I saw it, I knew for sure that it was going to be a huge hit in Utah here. And so my review was called Why the Greatest Showman is the most Mormon movie ever made. and what I do, I talk about how really it's just like perfect in style and theme and everything for the culture here in Utah. And so that was a really fun one to get a tap into my roots and talk about the themes and everything. So I like that one. So that can be really fun. Alyssa, what about you? What's a review that you did that you particularly loved that you're proud of?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit like Kristen, and I kind of have two different sides here because I have like a review that I'm proud of from kind of a writing perspective. And then I think with YouTube, at least, there's a little bit of a difference. I'm proud from the visuals and kind of an interesting thing that I did with another review. So in terms of ones that I'm proud of with writing, I probably would go with my review of the 1994 Lion King. Either that or like Toy Story 3. Like, and I feel like sometimes it's easiest for me to be most proud of movies that I have very, very strong feelings about. And so that Lion King is a movie that I really, really love and I have a very personal connection to it. And so being able to kind of get that across, but also touch on, the actual filmic qualities of the movie and kind of deal with that is a nice thing. Yeah. And from the YouTube more visual side, I'm pretty proud of kind of equally my review of the original Pet Sematary and my review of It Chapter 2. Because I live in Maine, and for both of those reviews, I was able to go kind of to actual locations where these movies were either filmed or are supposed to be set, and did portions of my review actually out at these locations. So that was really fun and kind of a nice integration, at least for me, a very fun element to it that I enjoyed quite a bit.
That's great. That's really fun. I recently got to cover the reopening of the theater, one of the theaters here, and for backseat directors, and that was really fun to get to kind of be sort of a reporter for a day kind of thing. Like, I don't know how well I did, but I did my best. So let's talk unpopular opinions, because that's always a challenging part of the job. And one of the one I wanted to talk about, everybody knows about my Shazam review, and it broke the internet. But the one I wanted to talk about is actually my review of The Glass Castle, which was a movie I really hated. I responded very negatively to it. And I just felt like the father was such a horrible human, and he had ruined these people's lives, and he'd been just this, and for them to be toasting him at the end, which just really made me mad. And I get that it's based on this woman's life, but I still don't, that doesn't give it a pass to me. I just found it really repugnant, and made me really mad. And so I did a rare rant review. And what was interesting is the experience, because my friend Sean, he really connected with it because he had a father who was an alcoholic. And so some of the things that they showed were really almost cathartic for him. And so I was able to have a conversation with him and understand his perspective. And it didn't change my perspective. I still hated the movie, but I could understand how he connected with it. And so that was actually a really positive experience of an unpopular opinion. That's like the best. That's what you hope to have, which so often you don't have. But yeah, that's one I'll always write. I very rarely rant on YouTube, but that was one time I did, and it was an interesting experience. But what about you, Kristen? What's an unpopular opinion that you had that stood out for you?
I'm cheating again because you brought up Shazam, and I actually wrote my initial review of Shazam was positive, but I wrote a supplementary article about it, about how I didn't really care for its portrayal of disability specifically, and it just went nuts on Twitter with people saying, you know it's a movie, right? You know it's not real. And I was like, funny how when people say, you know, Han shot first, you're like, it's really happening, and how dare you change that? But when I say I find it a bit, uncool for Shazam to beat up bullies with Freddie Freeman's crutch, considering his insurance company is definitely not going to pay for a new one, I'm like, you tell me that I shouldn't take movies as authentic. So, you know, I think it was fun to kind of point at the double standard that tends to happen when marginalized critics point out something. You know, then it's a movie. How dare you say it needs to be bound by logic? You know, it's a film. So that was fun to kind of point out people's fallacy of like when it's okay to step back and say a movie is fictional.
Well, and also that you can't point out a flaw in a film without being like the worst movie ever. Like, why can't you say, I still liked this film?
Yeah, I thought Shazam was perfectly fine. I'm like, the review was positive. I'm pointing out one little section of the movie that if you're disabled, you're just kind of like, well, that's kind of crappy. Like, wow.
Right. No, I was just gonna say, you did similar thing with Babysitters Club this week, which I really admired, actually, because I had never even thought of it that way. And I thought that it was a very well written piece, and that opened my eyes as a critic. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm like, I love that show. I think that show is great and all, but you know, it's hard to be part of a marginalized group, and have to kind of take those chucks under the chin, so to speak. So, and then for me, I think too, some of the hardest reviews that I've always had to write are ones where I'm meh on something. You know, something just doesn't connect to me, and it's not necessarily good or bad. And when I reviewed Captain Marvel, I said I didn't care for it. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. It's far from the worst movie. But it's also a Marvel movie, and at the end of the day, most people that know me know I don't really get the whole Marvel thing. Like, I understand it, but it's not for me. So I literally got a lot of, I think they were bots or men under Twitter handles that were female. I do not think that these were like women standing up for Captain Marvel that were tweeting me, but they were saying they were women who were like, how dare you go against the feminist code of, you know, not liking Captain Marvel. And I was like, I didn't say it was bad. They're like, well, your Rotten Tomatoes score is rotten. I'm like, well, let's talk about the binary of Rotten Tomatoes, which is like everything's either great or terrible, and there's no middle ground. So those are the two that I think most recently just made me very unpopular. And ironically, they're comic book movies from two different studios.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Alyssa, be glad that the blessing of being small is so you don't have to deal with that side of it, because it's you're just like, you didn't even listen to anything I said. All you cared was that I went rotten on it, and it didn't matter to you anything else, and you just came here just to vent because you're upset that I dropped your movie from a 94 to a 92. Rotten Tomatoes. But Danielle, what about you? What's an unpopular opinion that you had that you want to share with us?
I hated Joker.
Yeah.
Like, and that was a
Did
day.
we all hate Joker? I thought everybody hated Joker.
Well, apparently not based on Facebook. Like, I know people that loved it. I'm like, I got death threats for my review. I mean, I mean, we're having this whole conversation about police brutality, and I'm like, I had to go to the cops to report a death threat.
Yeah. I've done it. I've had to go to the cops.
Yeah, I mean, that was not a fun experience. I mean, having to pretty much turn all your social accounts private, warn your family about death threats and all that fun stuff. I mean, there was someone on Instagram that pretty much was doing targeted harassment.
Yeah, I remember Chris Stuckman said after his Batman v Superman review that people called his parents in Ohio, and we're just like, oh my gosh.
I remember I wrote an article for Daily Beast about Ant-Man and the Wasp and how it dealt with chronic pain. And again, I wrote it from a disability perspective, and I agreed with some people that were chronic pain sufferers who said that I didn't have the authority to speak to that. And I was like, I understand that. But then it got picked up by, I think, the Daily Caller or one of those big conservative sites. And it was like, Handicap Critic says Marvel movie, horrible, hates disabled people. And for like 3 days, it was just, my phone was like pinging from people threatening rape, threatening violence, threatening like, and I was just like, wow, I didn't know people cared enough about Ant-Man and the Wasp. It was nuts. So Danielle, I don't wish that on anybody.
Yeah, I held off on reviewing Joker until the Oscars because I was just like,
not worth it.
Taking a pass. I'm taking a pass.
You're lucky on that front. I mean, I saw it in Toronto, and the other film I was considering, there were two films that I was considering seeing at that time, and they both had their premiere a few days before, and they got terribly panned. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to see those two films. So it's pretty much Joker, or just go back to the press office and hang around. And I got my review up later that day, in which, in hindsight, probably should not have rushed it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I felt about my Shazam review too. I'm like, because I didn't like Spider-Man Far From Home either. And Equal Opportunity not liking last year Superman movies, and that one I didn't get hardly any pushback because I think I kind of learned from the Shazam experience, and so I did a written review for that one instead of YouTube, and anyway, so you live and learn. But Alyssa, what about you? What's your most sort of unpopular opinion that you've had, whether in your written or YouTube reviews?
For YouTube, I think it's a big consequence of just being fairly small on YouTube that I haven't really gotten too much pushback on really any of my reviews. I mean, certainly a few people, will come in and comment things, but for the most part, it's actual like conversations that we have. So I do have one that I'll talk about with a written review, but for YouTube, actually, my biggest problematic movie is one that hasn't come out, and it was for a few trailer reactions that I did. And so my trailer reactions, I don't just, it's not like I just sit there and react. Like, it's more of a trailer review because I spent quite a few minutes afterwards discussing it. And it was a teaser trailer and then an official trailer for the upcoming live action Mulan. And I did not bash it. I didn't say I loved it. I was it was very middling to me, those trailers. And so I was kind of like, I'm curious. It's not what I was anticipating, not quite as exciting as I had hoped, because I really love the animated Mulan. It's one of my favorite Disney movies. And so But people like I don't understand why, but those blew up as, you know, if you read the comments, you'd think that I like said I hated it, that's the worst movie ever, that it's going to be this like horrible thing, and that and I'm like, where are these comments coming from?
Yeah.
And for both of them. And so it was very strange and kind of it took me aback a bit, because I like you know, it's like what Kristen was saying, like sometimes if you're kind of like about something, it's like all of a sudden it gets blown out of proportion and people are thinking that you have this other opinion that you don't actually. So that's YouTube. And again, I haven't had any problems with reviews really there. For written reviews, though, one that quite a few years ago was a review I did of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And so Kubrick is kind of a very, I don't know, he's hit or miss for me. I love The Shining, and most of its other movies are kind of in the middle for me, but 2001: A Space Odyssey, I've just never really been a big fan of that one, and for a number of reasons. But in my review, you know, I talk about how I didn't like it that much. I didn't give it a great review, but I talk a lot about its importance, you know, and kind of what it did for film and all of the good aspects of it. But people, you know, kind of like what you guys were talking about with the kind of black and white nature of like Rotten Tomatoes, I think people just look at a rating and don't even bother sometimes to read a review or watch a review. And so I think that was what had happened. So I had the comments of that just like blew up, and it blew into this crazy thing where it eventually devolved into people, not me, who were arguing. Some people were arguing on my behalf, and others, it was weird. But
I'm with you on the 2001 suck, so I'm with you on that.
Yeah, it's so funny because that's like such a polarizing movie. Of course, there's going to be different opinions about that. I mean, it's so funny. Sorry, Danielle, you were saying?
I was going to say, I'm with you on 2001. I mean, I really did not like it from a story standpoint, but from a visual effects standpoint, you don't get Star Wars without that film.
Exactly. Yeah, and that, you know, I made kind of both points, saying that I, you know, personally I don't enjoy the movie. I find it kind of a little dull, a little boring at times, but that, you know, there are certain shots that are amazing, and then just kind of the advancements in cinematography and special effects are amazing and very important. But
that's the way I am with Blade Runner. Like, I can appreciate it on a visual level, I can appreciate it on its influence on film, but I've never gone through it without falling asleep. I just, my body's not strong enough. I can't. I even did the double header before in the theater for the new movie. Nope, fell asleep. That movie just is so laborious. The pacing is so slow to me. But it doesn't even matter, like, whether you, like, people should be interested in what people have to say and their critical analysis, not necessarily does this person agree with me. To me, that's interesting to hear. I like it reading and listening to reviews that are different than my own, because I learned something. It's just like I was talking about with my friend Sean, that hearing his perspective, it didn't make me like the movie anymore, but it made me a better person because I understood my friend and understood this experience. So I think that's a shame that people are so sort of myopic in their own view of that everybody has to agree with me, that they don't get to see the world as a more interesting, diverse place. And I think that's a shame. And what you were saying about trailer reactions, it's so funny to me because, like, we have no idea what the movie's going to be like. It's just the trailer.
Right.
So like I had my trailer reaction for Wonder Woman 84. I said I was super excited about it, super pumped, but I said I'm a little nervous because I loved how I thought it was very poetic and beautiful with Steve Trevor in the original film, and that he sacrificed his life, and that was something meaningful to me. And I'm nervous about them bringing him back, and that's going to sort of lessen the value of that sacrifice. To me, that's a totally valid point. And there were people like, "Oh, you're not even going to give the movie a chance because you're going into it expecting it." Like, and I was like, I made one point about how I was a little nervous Which
Yeah, that's what I've noticed too, with the Mulan trailers, but other trailer reactions too. It's like people get very fixated on one kind of almost offhanded comment you make in your kind of, analysis, or kind of just even, positing what's going to be happening. And they just like take that and focus in on that and just ignore the other like 8 minutes of your video and focus on the like 3 seconds that you spent saying that you were possibly concerned about something that may or may not actually happen in the movie.
It's like, you didn't want my reaction. You wanted me to parrot back your reaction to the trailer. And that's a problem that you can get a lot with people with reviews or with reactions or any kind of content that we produce, is they don't really want to hear what you have to say. They want to hear what they think parroted back to them. And yeah, so that can be very, very, very frustrating. And yeah, so thank you so much, you guys, for coming on and doing this. I really appreciate it. Kristen, do you have any sort of closing thoughts about your experience as a critic?
I mean, for me, I think it's been incredibly rewarding. I mean, I don't know, I've talked about this before. I don't know any other job I could have done that would have given me the platform to not just share my thoughts about movies, but hopefully change hearts and minds on some things, whether that be gender or disability. So, this is just kind of my shout out to hire women of color, hire trans women, hire disabled women, just hire more women, because we need them out there changing the discourse.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. It's such a joy. And the great thing about film is that it allows you to experience other people's journeys in such an immersive way. And so we are blessed. We can't forget that, with all the frustrations that we are very, very blessed. Danielle, what about you? What's your sort of closing thoughts about the experience of being a critic?
God, I mean, for female, when you take female filmmakers in general,
yes,
I mean, a lot of times 80% just end up doing the one film because they can't get that financing to get the second film off the ground, because all these negative reviews from straight white men for their first film. I mean, it's rough.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Very, very true. Alyssa, what about you? What would you say to somebody that's thinking about starting a YouTube channel, thinking about starting a blog, thinking about reviewing movies? What would you say as somebody who's also a small YouTuber that you say, this is a great experience, this is worth it? Why don't you go forward, go ahead? What would you say?
I mean, I would definitely recommend, if you're thinking about it, start thinking more seriously about it. I took way too long to do it. I kind of regret not jumping into the YouTube side of things when I originally was thinking about it. Because when I first was had the inkling of maybe starting a YouTube channel for my reviews, this was back in 2015. And so I didn't actually start this channel until last March. So March of 2019. So it was 4 years where I had a notebook and I had all these notes and all these plans. I had planned out every detail. I had the colors that I was going to use for my artwork and the banners. I was crazy with my planning, and I just didn't jump into the YouTube side of things for far too long. And I regret that, because it was kind of dumb not to. There was no reason really not to get into it. And so definitely, if you are even possibly considering it, go for it. And you never know until you try. It's definitely a different experience watching versus actually creating content. And you can look into and plan and research as much as you can, but until you actually try it out, you don't really know how you feel about it. And I think the more voices that we have, whether we're talking women or people of color, or just anybody, even straight white males, right? If you're interested, go for it. It's definitely a very rewarding experience, and I think the more perspectives, the more voices that we have out there, the better.
I agree. I think that's a really great point to leave on, that we need to hear all different voices, all different experiences. And it's such a positive experience to use your creativity. And even if you only end up interacting with a small group of people, that's still a small group of people. And you can make friends, and you can, I mean, I can't even imagine if I wasn't a podcaster, if I wasn't a YouTuber, how I would have gone through this quarantine time. Because I live alone, and I don't know. Thank goodness that I've had it. I'm so grateful, and so thank you so much to each of you for coming on doing this. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun for me, and hopefully we can continue to sort of communicate with each other and support each other. And Kristen, how can people find you and your content?
I'm on Twitter at journeys_film. That's where you can find a lot of my writing. I also do most of my reviewing now over at IndieWire, which you can find out at IndieWire.com. And I also talk about classic films and review them over on my podcast, Ticklish Business, which you can find wherever you get your podcasts.
Great. And I'll have all that in the description. And so, Danielle, what about you? How can people find your content?
Solzy@themovies.com, SOLZY, or you can find me on Twitter at Danielle SATM. That's DANIELLE SATM. And I'm on Facebook at Solzy@themovies. Again, that's SOLZY.
Great. And Alyssa, what about you?
So you can find me at Mainly Movies. That's Mainly with an E, like the state of Maine. And I'm on YouTube, but also social media, so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. And check out the Hallmarkies podcast. We have a lot of fun stuff there as well. And so thank you so much, ladies. I really appreciate it. And we will hopefully be able to talk again soon. So bye, everyone.